Investigators looking into the collapse of the Champlain Tower South condominium in Surfside, Florida, near Miami, gave an informational meeting where they showed us new computer enhancements that they have, as well as shocking new evidence of pre-existing damage. Investigators gave us evidence showing that this building had a lot more damage than anybody had previously thought, and this building was screaming out for help. In addition to analyzing the evidence that was given to us by investigators, I also want to answer the question, how was this building able to stand there for 40 years before collapsing? And how is it that a pool deck is able to pull down an entire building with it? And what could have been done to prevent this?
I will now present several observations of distress prior to the collapse of the tower that took place across the pool deck, the street level parking deck, and the garage. Malfunction of a sliding glass door at the northern edge of the pool deck that took place approximately 1 month before the June 24 failure. Visually obvious cracking in a planter wall and planter box, and the sagging of a pool deck slab that took place in the weeks before the failure. A water leak through the street level parking deck slab into the parking garage that took place in the hours before the failure, and the collapse of a portion of the southern privacy wall and the street level parking deck that took place just moments before the CTS tower collapsed.
Now, she's going to talk about this malfunctioning sliding glass door. And this was mentioned in passing in a newspaper article, like right after the collapse. But this is the first time you're seeing real details on what was going on.
Approximately 1 month before collapse, several eyewitnesses shared that a sliding glass door located adjacent to the northern edge of the pool deck and exactly over an identified construction joint broke twice within a span of a few weeks and became partially inoperable. The eyewitness shared that the sliding glass door came off of its track and was only partially operable following the initiating damaging event. The upper right-hand image is a photo of the pool deck taken several months before the failure of June 24, but showing the sliding glass door that suffered damage later on and outlined in orange. The image in the lower right-hand side is a photo of the same sliding glass door taken from the interior of the apartment several months before the collapse of CTS. The yellow annotations in the lower right-hand image are from interviews with eyewitnesses familiar with the damage to the store. The yellow arrow indicates the eastern portion of the sliding glass door, which remained functional after experiencing damage twice within a span of a few weeks. The yellow circle denotes the western portion of the sliding glass door, which did become stuck in a nearly closed position and cannot be used for approximately 1 month before the collapse of the building.
Now, this sliding glass door, and what makes this so important, is this belongs to Sarah Nair, and she was in a lot of the earlier interviews with the news, but her unit is 111, and here I'm showing you a much clearer shot of it across the pool deck so you can see exactly where they're talking about. And this is in that now famous 111 stack. You've probably heard that mentioned numerous times. So that's all of these units, 111, 211. The Ring camera was in 711 because this is the area where most of the action happened before the collapse. And about a half hour before the collapse, just after 1 a.m., Sarah Nair was noticing all of these noises and banging sounds, and she wanted to find out what was the cause of it at 1 a.m. So she grabbed her kids, runs out to the security guard, tells them to call 911. And so that is the very first 911 call that comes in 4 minutes before the building collapsed. So that was her sliding glass door. Now, this issue with the sliding glass door, it really should have been a big red flag here. Now, I know it's Monday morning quarterbacking now, but I am hoping that property managers going forward will learn from something like this. And you should know that a sliding glass door doesn't just stop working. They don't just go from not closing the next day. That's why this is a red flag. So I have a lot of experience with this because even my own sliding glass doors have done this. And I've done a lot of condo flip projects, and I always bring in a sliding glass door guy to repair the bearing. So what happens is your sliding glass doors, they degrade slowly over time, like maybe over a couple of years. So it might get a little more resistance there when you're trying to close it. Your rollers at the bottom with the bearings, they start getting dirty and filled with dust and everything, and they'll start dragging a little bit. Sometimes you might have to lift up and get it over, but you can still close. So what happens is that little metal track along the bottom of your slider, it will start to get pitted and out of smooth. It gets very rough. And so now you have to pay extra money for them to put another little sliver of metal over that, like a track encasement, to give you another smooth ride again. But the thing is, the doors do not just go from working today to failing tomorrow where you can't even close it. So the reason why that door was stuck was because the structure is moving slightly like this, and it's now impinged the movement. So that should have been the flag right there. During the Zoom call, NIST presenter Judith Matrani-Razor produced this slide that I want you to take a look at. It was some eye-opening information here.
The turquoise lines are annotations by our team of known repaired cracks in the ceiling of CTS Garage. This is the first time we're showing you this image. The orange rectangle in the 3D model of the building shown in the upper left-hand side denotes the area where this photo was approximately taken in the garage.
So for about the past year or so, every time NIST gave us an update, they were always talking about this column, K13.1 that sits out there on the pool deck, and they keep showing us these pool deck pictures, but they never show you what's below it. So now I'm going to take us inside the garage down below, and we're going to look at it from underneath, and we're going to try to figure out what kind of damage was there and how could this have gotten past everybody? Why didn't anybody see it? Now, those of you who follow my channel, you remember that back in 2021, I made that chart for you where I showed you some of the damage on the roof of the garage there inside underneath the pool deck. And you recall that now famous video shot by our friend Fiorella, who shot this video on her cell phone as she was walking around inside the garage there. She had gone there to look at a unit to purchase and was trying to find the parking space for the unit so she could see where it is located. But then walking through the garage there, she took a certain pathway there, and I looked at all of the damage I could see on the roof from her video, and based on that, I created this chart that you might recall and showed it on several videos so far. But anyway, what NIST showed us on this new picture in this Zoom call on this update was something that we had never seen before, because it was based on all of their research and witness interviews and other videos and other photographs. They were able to piece together where all of the damaged and repaired areas were, and there's many more than we ever expected here, certainly more than even my chart. So let me show you this overlay that I made where I took their picture that they released, and I'm going to overlay it over my chart that I made a few years ago. So I would just want to show you Fiorella's video again here so we can get a much clearer view of where we're at. This is the south wall of the complex right here. She's pointed between spaces 50 to 52, and now she's panned the camera around to the west, and that's where Collins Avenue would be, right here above, of course, up on the street level. So my slide shows where she was standing and shooting video so that I could determine where all of the ceiling damage was and make all of my blue ovals to depict the damage on my slide. But look at all the damage and the stalactites there up on the ceiling. So for those of you who haven't seen this video before, it might be kind of eye-opening as to just how much damage and leaks and prior repairs that they've had there. Now the area in interest is going to be back over here because that's our K13 column. We're going to see it better in a minute, but I just wanted to show you where she's looking for space number 17, which I believe is the space that's associated with the unit that she was looking at. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and stop real quick. That's K13.1 right there. That's the column that they say was the weakest design, that had the lowest margin for failure of all of the columns in this entire pool deck area. And remember, the pool's back over here. And so this is where she's standing now, facing diagonally south and looking at column K13.1. So let me try to get a little sharper view of it. So this is it here, and you can see all of the damage that's along the ceiling right over here. And then remember, I'm pointing over here. You'll see when we get closer, that is some corrugated plastic sheeting that the Homeowners Association had attached to the ceiling to keep water from dripping onto the cars down below. And you can already see a puddle right here, which is one that the pool maintenance guy the day before the collapse said he saw a puddle right here. Now, these two spaces right here, and I'll show you why this is so important. This is space number 75. That's space number 76. So the column K13.1 over here is supposed to be at the beginning of where the parking space, where your vehicle would pull in. So this SUV is parked in one space over from it. So after the collapse, when you look at the column there that has the 75 printed on it, that's for space number 75. So that is your column K13.1, which has the lowest margin of safety of all of the columns in that area by half of the requirements of the building codes at that time. So if we come back over here, and I've overlaid their picture over my chart that I made a few years ago of the garage, where you can see all of the damaged spots that I had pointed out on the ceiling, and I charted them here on this chart. And so as you look, NIST right here is pointing to this column K13, and you can easily see this is the area that has the most amount of concentrated damage and repairs and cracks that have been fixed. Look how much damage there is on their blue lines there compared to my blue ovals. So Fiorella, and I'll show you where she's standing here when she was shooting this. Let me put it right back here again. See, there's that space 75 and 76 that I showed you. That dark SUV is parked right here in space number 74. So she's standing right here looking this way. And there's that corrugated sheet plastic that I pointed out. And it's right directly over the driveway and then the ramp leading outside the garage. And Sarah Nair's apartment, number 111, was right here. This is the one where that sliding glass door was located, right in this spot. So you can see everything is tied to this spot. And I'll show you where these two columns are because you're going to see them in a second. Her friend is walking along there, and let me just come right up behind him. So he is now standing in space number 74. This is space 75 and 76. There's the column here. And let's see if we can get a better, I don't know if there's going to be a better view. Now she keeps pinning the camera back. And then right here, you're going to see, this is the car that's in space number 37. This is where the pool is. And so this is the view and where she is standing in the garage. And why I keep harping on all of this is it's so important to show where K13.1 is in relation to everything else in this garage. So the pool, remember, extends down into the garage, and people would be swimming inside, in here, up above, outside. This is the walls of the pool down in the garage. This is the south wall that separates Champlain Tower South from the 87 Park condo next door. That's the newer one that they sued as part of that liability suit. So, but again, you can see how there's water all over here and mostly around some of these columns because it's probably been actively leaking. Wherever you can see the paint peeling on the ceiling is probably where there's active leaks. Let's see right there. So here's that corrugated plastic sheet that I showed you earlier, and it's right in ground zero of a whole bunch of active leaking that is going on right now. And this is right in the spot where you could see from that famous cell phone video right after the pool deck collapsed and they were shooting down the ramp from across the street. They were shooting the video. And that was all the junk you saw on the floor was right here in this very spot. And let's see if she swings back around again to capture. She doesn't. So she's moving over and she's pointing over to number 17 there.
I got it, 17. Okay.
So if we stop right here, and I'm going to back it up just a little bit. This right here is the 9.1 row. So right here is directly underneath Sarah Nair's sliding glass door. That was the slider that was broken. This is right under the southern edge of the building, is located right here, folks, right in this very spot. So as we analyze this part here, the big takeaway from Judith Matrani Reiser's slide that she put up, showing us all of those blue lines representing all of the cracked areas on the pool deck. Remember, this is the bottom of the pool deck, and it's the ceiling of the garage down below. So it had so many cracks that when combined with the 50% design understrength of the columns and slabs in that area and the misplaced reinforcements within the concrete by the contractor when it was built. Yeah, we all think it's a miracle that the building stood for 40 years, but this building had been screaming out for God knows how long. Remember, this garage video was shot 1 year before the collapse, too, and you could already see those puddles of water all over in the place from the leaks. So Judith's slide from NIST clearly shows that there was a lot more damage on that garage ceiling than even I thought, you thought, or anybody thought even a few years ago. There was a lot more damage than anybody ever knew there was. And unfortunately, nobody knew to determine that this was a sign that the building was crying out for help.
In early June 2021, just 3 weeks before the failure of Champlain Tower South, severe distress was noted in audiovisual data and by eyewitnesses of a masonry planter wall and planter box supported on the pool deck. The photo in the upper right-hand side shows the distress that was noticed 3 weeks before the building collapsed, including a long horizontal crack in the planter wall, identified here with an orange arrow. An enlargement of this portion of this planter just below shows the severe distress and displacement where the planter wall meets the planter box. Our team collected another photo of the same planter taken in April of 2020, roughly 14 months before the June 2021 photo, which shows no distress.
Now, she didn't show this photo, but this is what they were talking about. So in June 2021, when you see the bottom photo there, this was taken by, I believe, an employee of the Morabito engineering firm who probably should have gone down into the garage below to see if there was any displacement in the ceiling.
Therefore, something happened between April of 2020 and early June 2021. Glenn shared in our June update that the slab column connection at the intersection of the two dashed lines in the upper right-hand image, or at grid line K13.1, has one of the lowest calculated margins against failure in our analysis to date. Approximately 3 weeks, and then again 1 week before collapse, an eyewitness described the gate between the pool deck and street level parking becoming jammed and unusable. The image on the upper right-hand side shows the gate between the pool deck and the street level parking deck, taken several years before the collapse and before any damage was observed to the gate. The image in the lower left-hand side shows an artistic rendering of the observations made by an eyewitness. The eyewitness reported that several weeks before the collapse, this gate jammed and cannot be opened. At the same time, the northern portion of the gate shifted down vertically relative to the southern portion by less than half an inch. The eyewitness reported that the same gate suffered a more significant vertical displacement downward approximately 1 week before the collapse of CTS. The northern portion of the gate displays vertically down approximately 1 inch relative to the southern portion of the gate. This observation is significant because this gate is adjacent to the planter box that contemporaneously showed severe distress and displacement prior to the failure of the June 24, 2021 tragedy.
Okay, so this is where they're talking about right here on the pool deck. So K13.1, that column is right here next to this wastebasket, like just in the beginning of the bush over here. That gate is right here, not even, 10, 12 feet away at the most. It was this rightmost gate, the northern gate. 1 month before was okay. 3 weeks before, it was down a half an inch. And 1 week before, it was down 1 inch. And of course, we all know that around 3 weeks before is when they had that famous long crack appear down this wall right here, as you can see here in these photos that showed where there was a definite, probably 2.5 inch drop in the slab. So what this really means, folks, is that the slab, the pool slab there, at that point was sagging because it was enough to sag down a half inch, and that drags the northern part of the gate down with it. It's kind of doing like this, you see. So that should have been a warning sign. Now, unfortunately, who could have known these types of things? But at least now in hindsight, and this can be taught to people and engineers and property managers going forward, we know to look for these things. Now, to give you a good approximation of what this gate should have looked like, this is the closest simulation you'll ever see. I took these two pictures at the Champlain Towers North condominium, which is the sister tower about a block north of this. And they have almost exactly the same floor plan. And so there's their gate at the pool, and that's what it should have looked like.
Within 24 hours of the collapse, one eyewitness described a leak in the garage ceiling, roughly in the area highlighted here, that got progressively worse as the night went on. The eyewitness described the water leak as a drip approximately 9 hours before the collapse. And the same eyewitness described the water drip turning into a water faucet just a few hours before the collapse of the building.
And I'll tell you, man, I would have given anything for any of these witnesses the night of the collapse who were down in the garage and saw leaking coming down, would have given anything to see photographs there because it was this close to breaking through and doing that punching shear.
The image on the upper right-hand side is the same aerial image I showed earlier with the garage ceiling cracks annotated in turquoise, the construction joints annotated with pink lines, and the key pool deck and street level parking deck observations annotated with purple dots, and the location of this garage ceiling leak highlighted with a purple oval. The lower image is a drawing, not to scale, from the interview with the eyewitness, where the approximate location of the leak is shown with a red line and black circle, and where the exact observation is captured with a digital yellow sticky note.
Now, as it turns out, I was able to get a very good crystal clear screenshot here from Fiorella's walkthrough video of the garage, and this is the area where they're talking about. So this white SUV over here is over space 45 is the area where they saw the leak. Now, we don't know how approximate it was or whether it would even be visible here because there are so many stalactites of paint here dripping from the ceiling. Now, what does this mean? This means that they cosmetically attempted to paint at some point here, and probably without primer too, I would add. And so what you're seeing here is this peeling of that paint because of the moisture that's dripping down out of this ceiling or roof of the garage, which, remember, this is the bottom side at this point here. This is the bottom side of underneath the driveway of the covered parking part that's up on the top. So we really can't see what's going on over here. According to them, the crack or whatever it was that he saw, the big leak, was over here in this area. But seeing all of these stalactites, it's not all that surprising that he saw that in this area.
Within 1 minute of the eastern tower collapsing, we have footage from 2 cameras that together confirm that a portion of the south privacy wall shown here in green collapsed prior to the tower collapsing. In previous advisory committee meetings and in our June video update, we shared that footage from the beach access walkway and south face cameras shown in the upper right-hand side confirm that the south portion of the street level parking deck collapsed at least 39 seconds before the tower collapsed. We have been able to collect from interviews, audiovisual data, and building records that there were many events of distress occurring across the pool deck and the street level parking decks for days, weeks, a month, and even years before the collapse of Champlain Tower South. These early signs of distress were all concentrated in the pool deck and street level parking deck area, with much concentration near previously repaired cracks and along construction joints. Glenn will describe in more detail how construction joints in the pool deck that were improperly constructed could contribute to this distress.
At the time of the failure, the pool deck's slab column connections had critically low margins of safety. The bulk of the critically low margins of safety was caused by design understrength and misplaced slab reinforcement. Once failure initiated, the structure's low resistance to progressive collapse allowed the collapse of the pool deck to spread into and throughout the middle and east parts of the tower.
Now, NIST had showed us this slide, I believe, back in April of this year, and you can see that design understrength and misplaced slab reinforcement were the 2 biggest items that caused the bulk of the critically low margins of safety for this building. So this means the other blue boxes on the screen, which have heavier, more extensive planters that were added, the added fill and pavers around the pool, and the corrosion of the slab reinforcement that caused all of those cracks that I showed you on the other slide with all the blue crack lines, those were still less than the design mistakes made by the engineer and also the mistakes made by the contractor with the slab reinforcement, the misplacement of the rebar rods within the concrete columns. Something else that NIST pointed out on this call was that the pool deck had these construction joints built into the slab. So you can see those pinkish purple lines going there, and you can see where the K13.1 column is by the yellow arrow. And right next to it, you can see the construction seam kind of does a zigzag, and that's where most of the cracking damage was originally done to the deck from, all of those years of the leaks. So it's no surprise that there was also failure there for a column that was also under-designed. So when you do these construction joints, you can see that you have to have that D shape built into where they connect together. Otherwise, water will leak through the connection joint, and it will get to the rebar rods at the bottom, like you can see there, the bottom slab, the reinforcement, and that red line represents the rebar rod expanding due to corrosion and causing concrete spalling and cracking of the slab. So what do you think happened? Well, of course, they found some construction joints there that had no dowels as required by the architectural drawing that you see at the top of the page there. So they were missing them. And then not only that, they did a bad job of making that D shape in the concrete, which is also known as the key, which is what helps interlock the two construction joint slabs together. Okay, so during the investigation, NIST is looking at two scenarios. The first scenario that you see on the left is where the failure initiates at the pool deck, which is where I think it happened. So as you see in 1A, it starts there in the green shaded area of the pool deck, and then it progresses to 1B, which is the southernmost wall of the building where the columns K, L, and M are, and 9.1. And then from there, it progresses to the center of the building and takes that whole building down, and then it progresses east to the east part that was left standing by itself that eventually fell down a few seconds later. Now, another scenario that was a popular theory by a lot of people that NIST has drifted away from since June was about the water that used to collect at the bottom of the columns in the garage floor, like we saw in numerous spots on Fiorella's garage walkthrough video. So many people thought, well, that weakened the concrete and that caused the building to collapse. But that doesn't seem to be true now because they haven't really found any damage there. The piles were all fine and there was no sinking anywhere across the property after all of their exhaustive testing. Now, NIST investigators did find that the columns along the southern edge of the building, right where the pool slab steps up to the lobby level, was problematic in the fact that the lap splices in the reinforcement rebar were not up to code, and so many people figured, well, maybe that's what caused the collapse. But it turns out there wasn't enough wrong there to initiate a collapse, even though it did slightly weaken the columns. And if you compare the left image to the right image here, the column you see on the left is L9.1 on the southern edge of the building, and the other column is L8, which is one row over, and look at the difference in the lap splicing. So based on their recent work, just even since June, NIST does not think that the failure started in any of these tower basement columns. And so those four red ones there are the southernmost border of the building at row 9.1. And the yellow columns there are the row 8, which is the next row over, which would be the most suspicious columns, but none of them have generated any problems that they can see. Another important distinction that NIST is now making is that first level pool slab where it steps up into the first level lobby is no longer considered to be an initiation point of the collapse. Even though it had some kind of, weak points about it, it was not enough to initiate a collapse. And this is based on the testing that they did. And as you can see in the two bottom photos where they duplicated this whole step-up slab and duplicated the forces and characterized the failure modes here. So at the university, they had completely duplicated that pool lobby slab connection and ran their tests on it to see whether pulling it apart there would cause any kind of initiation or a propagation of an existing initiation of the collapse. So this is a very important distinction that you need to make here. You need to understand the difference. So what they're saying is even though it did not initiate the collapse, the components here and the way these columns were constructed here with that step-up pool slab made it such that the building was weak enough that it had not much resistance at all to propagation of the collapse once it had already started, once it had initiated in another spot, probably about 20, 30 feet away. They also showed us some new computer enhancements that they just recently made to the security camera footage of the collapse. As you can see on the right, it actually looks a lot brighter and easier to see exactly what was going on than we've been able to see before. Because of this computer enhancement, we're able to see, as you can tell in the middle and right pictures, look how the center part of the building is collapsing down next to column M on the right side of it. But the roof is slanted out at such an angle that you can easily see that the right side of it alongside column M towards the east is falling at a much greater rate than the rest of the central part of the building. And then further enhancements, if you look at the picture on the upper left, see that black number 7? It looks like a number 7 on the roof there. That's the penthouse roof falling as they showed in the image. And then in the second set over in the middle of the page, you can see there that you had the roof was exposed back to grid line 4. So now you can see columns K4 and L4 poking up indicating that it looks to me like the roof had just done it like a punching shear once the collapse had initiated. And then on the far right, you can see how that black rectangle there kind of represents the part of the roof beyond the penthouse, which proves that that was the last part of the roof to fall down. As we analyze this overview shot, this bird's eye view shot after the collapse, and here's you can see all of the different stories of the different patios that had landed on the pile when it was all said and done. Here's the line of the planters that was along the pool deck right in front of the units there. And so Sarah Neer's apartment number 111 would have been like right around this spot here with the busted sliding glass door that wasn't opening right. So, and then here is the K13.1 column where they now think that the collapse of the pool deck initiated and then it progressed into the building, taking out the columns that were here. All of those columns, by the way, are now covered because the southern wall of the building was right along this area here, somewhere in here. So you can't even see where any of these columns were. Anyway, but we know based on the photographs that the 111 stack is right in this area here, the 11 stack of condos. When you zero in, you can see here's all of the columns that survived. And then, of course, here's K13.1 poking up right by the planter. And then there's a close-up shot of it right here where you can see, you know, the garage is right down below it in that space. And it was just a standard punching shear of the slab right here on this column. Now, a lot of people have been asking me for years now, how is it that the one part of the building collapsed and took down the east tower with it? And then how come the west part survived and didn't seem to be bothered at all by this collapse? In fact, when you look at photographs that were taken the next day, it's like the building was right there and it just got sheared right through and it almost looks like a dollhouse. So how did that part survive? Is staring you right in the face. Let's take a look. So here I made a screenshot. Here's the poles on the second floor, third floor, and fourth floor, and the fifth floor. Well, the answer is right here. You see these massive, huge beams? They go all the way around the perimeter of this part of the building. These beams are also providing stability for that massive shear wall on the backside of the building. And so sure enough, when you look at this floor plan of the building, now this is Champlain Tower South, but they're both the same in this part of the building. But you can see that here on the floor plans on page 28 of 336. See the dotted lines here? These are those beams. They're all the way around the building. Big, thick, massive beams going around this section. They're going in and out, look, beam after beam going across here, transferring the load. So now when we come back here, you can see the load is coming to these beams and it is getting transferred down to the first floor through all of the columns, actually. Plus, the columns are thicker, as you can see on this side of the building, than they were with those spindly columns in the pool deck that were like 12 inches wide and I think 16 at the most under the building itself that collapsed. Now we want to answer the three questions that I get the most frequently. Number one, everybody always asks, okay, if there was all of these design errors and build errors in the building, how did it stand there for 40 years without collapsing? The next one that a lot of people are always commenting to me saying, I just can't get my hands around it. How is it that a pool deck collapsing is able to bring down an entire building? And then lastly, people ask, okay, what could have been done in the design to prevent this from happening in the first place? Okay, so how did it stand there for 40 years? Well, just because you design a failure into the building like this, it could fail any time from a day, a month, a year, 10 years, or 40 years, as in the case of the Champlain Tower South. So, for example, the Hyatt Regency Hotel collapse that I'm working on a video for coming up, this took place in 1981 in Kansas City at the Hyatt inside, and the two skyways fell down and killed over 100 people. Now, the building was about a year old, and they lasted a year before coming down. Why didn't they fail any other time? It's just whenever it's ready for the right combination of events to weaken it just enough that it can no longer hold the load. And then that is the initiation of your collapse. That is the straw that broke the camel's back right there. Okay, so to answer the question, how does a collapse of the pool deck, which was pretty much this area right in here, how does this bring down the entire tower? And the answer lies in the floor plans. And when you look in the garage, if you remember Fiorella's video, you could see all those concrete beams going everywhere. So this is what we call a beam A, according to the floor plan. And there's a beam A, there's another beam A. There was a bunch of them going around here to support the planters underneath the slab. That is where these huge beams were built. Now, if you have a collapse here in the deck, and it's then going to collapse these two columns, that means this end of the beams are going to drop down to the garage floor, and that's now going to pull and rip the beams out of these columns here because there's nothing to support them. And so that now leaves these columns along here with giant divots in them, as you saw like in the video where they were testing it at the university a few minutes ago. And so that now means that none of these columns, which are the main support columns for the southern wall of this building, are allowed to do their job anymore. They've been compromised and they can no longer support the load that they were designed to handle because they're no longer in the configuration that they were in when they were built. And so that is what triggered the collapse of the building. So other than making the columns bigger under the pool deck, which I think they should have done in the first place, the other thing they could have done, and probably should do anyway, is to implement what we call like a construction seam, or some people might call it an isolation seam. But basically, you got your pool deck here, the building is here like this, and you don't connect them. You don't connect them through any dowels or anything. You just make them butt up against each other. That way, if the pool deck has to collapse like this, the building is untouched. Now, 4 years ago, I made this video, which I'm showing you part of, where I explained how the Fort Lauderdale Marriott Harbor Beach Hotel has a similar idea that I think could head off something like this. So this is very common in garages and in other structures when you need to isolate two parts of the building. So this is what it looks like topside when you go up above the garage and then outside on the back patio. So this is all facing the beach. Okay, then over here we have this other transition, which looks like it keeps going all the way down to the end of the wall there, right at the ocean. Okay, so right here along the deck, I believe this might be an isolation seam because you can see it runs all the way down to the end there. No, so this is what we're talking about. If you have these seams coming along this way here like this, and they're not touching the building, they're not connected in any way, shape, or form. So when it comes time for the pool deck to collapse in here, it would just collapse and it wouldn't touch any part of the building because they're no longer connected, see? So you wouldn't have those beam A's that connect underneath the planters and go in and tie into the columns here and here and here. And there's probably some underneath all of these as well, because they would just have to find a different way to provide support underneath these planters, or not have the planters there altogether. Now, a block or two up the road where you have the Champlain Towers North, they have a smaller pool. The floor plan is essentially the same size. They don't have these additional planters, so they don't have even as many planters, but it's a smaller pool deck, and so I guess that's how they lucked out. They have 2 units fewer per floor also, even though it's pretty much exactly the same floor plan. Now, this NIST meeting that we were talking about here today, this was not necessarily a public hearing. This was more or less them giving updates to the other members of the National Construction Safety Committee. And so they did allow public commentary on it. But the next actual public hearing is going to take place in March 2026, where by then they should have everything almost nailed down. They pretty much have, I think, the root cause nailed down at this point to that one column K13.1. And so we're going to see what other updates they have and what scenarios that they have eliminated going forward and what they're going to start putting into their final report. So stay tuned for that. And if you haven't checked out any of these other videos that we've done here related to this, make sure you binge watch these. And thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll see all of you on the next one.